What do you think about when you think about amusement parks? Images of fun, laughter, children, balloons, rides, stalkers? Grab a blanket, turn off your lights because they were there, riding the roller coasters and eating cotton candy. Adventureland. I'm new to the site and came across a post in the subreddit that reminded me of something I encountered a long time ago. Now with that in mind, the details are a bit fuzzy, so bear with me, though I'd share. I'm not sure if many of you have heard of it, but Adventureland is a small amusement park in Long Island. Back when I lived in Long Island, Adventureland was my favorite place to visit. Over the summertime, I begged my mom to bring me at least once a week. I had to be at least 6 years old when this happened. My mom and her very pregnant sister brought me and my younger brother to the park just like they always would. But this trip was different. After going on a few rides, my aunt began to notice this man following us around. I swear I'll never forget what he looked like. He was tall, thin, with salt and pepper hair. He was wearing one of those muscle tees and shorts. I guess she just brushed it off until she noticed he was alone. No kids, and he kept staring at me, smiling. I was on the merry-go-round when he approached me. He came up to me on the ride, smiled, and said, "I would love to take your picture sometime." My aunt lost it at that point. She started screaming at him to get away from me. She and my mom dragged us to this little first aid house where they demanded to speak to security. I was hysterically crying the entire time. I really didn't know what was going on, but I remember having this terribly uneasy feeling. Apparently, the guy got kicked out the previous week for taking pictures of a visiting scout girl. Somehow he managed to get back into the park. After everything was sorted out with the security, my mom and aunt decided it was time to leave. When we stepped outside of this little house, he was sitting on a bench, eating ice cream, waiting for us. My aunt started cursing at him again, saying she was going to call the police, saying whatever she could to frighten him. Instead, he laughed, waved at me and said, "I'll see you soon, sweetie," and parted with a smile. Needless to say, I didn't go back to Adventureland for some time after that. I've never been this afraid of work before. Hi everyone. This happened to me literally 2 hours ago as I was closing up at work, and I'm still a little shook up about it. Wall of text. I work in a pretty well-known amusement park in the US, and part of my job every night is to shut down the park. That means me and 3 coworkers all walk to the back of the park, split up, and walk back on our separate routes until we meet again at the park entrance. Anyways, one of my coworkers split off early to do her route, and the rest of us walked to the back of the park. About halfway there, we met up with these 2 guys, one super tall and one short, who looked like they were heading out of the park. They actually asked us how to leave and we told them. However, instead of leaving just then and there, like most people do, they stayed. The short one was standing behind one of my coworkers, and the tall one directly in front of her. The tall one leaned down. My coworker is like 4'11", and pointed to the pin he was wearing on his shirt, and began telling her that someone told him that if he was wearing that pin, it meant that we could all have a hug, which is not true. It's actually in our job description to not touch a guest under any circumstance if we can help it. While he was doing this, his short friend started batting at my coworker's hair playfully after what seemed like forever, but was probably like around 2 minutes or so. They left for what we assumed was the exit. We did our normal routes, but I know I was extra cautious doing mine, especially while clearing the men's bathroom just in case they came back. I got to the end of my route without any incidences and waited for the rest of my coworkers. At this point, It had been a full hour since everything had happened, so I was standing there and I noticed the tall one walking over to me. Obviously, it doesn't take an hour to walk out of the park, so of course, I was creeped out. And I was all by myself at this time. It was well lit, but there weren't a lot of people around. Anyways, he came up to me and started talking whatever. He was saying my name a lot. We have name tags, so he could obviously read it. And he kept asking if I was a manager because I had a radio. I'm not. We just need them to clear the park. I told him so, and he asked me if I like being alone in the park at night. Not right now, no. He also kept staring directly at my chest. He did not make eye contact once. He finally left me alone, and my coworkers got back from their route. They had also apparently creeped on the coworker who had split off from the rest of the group after we had given them directions out of the park, which explains what they were doing for that hour. We were all really nervous at this point, but we felt better that we were all together. We finished cleaning the last section of the park when I looked over to the main entrance and realized that they were still there. They were talking to my other coworkers, whose job it was to wave and say goodnight to everyone leaving the park. After they finally left, thanks to our lovely security guards, we found out that these guys, who were in their 30s, had actually asked two of my coworkers out, both being 19, and had actually gone so far as to ask them if they had boyfriends, and if they loved them and why. Our security guards told us that if they tried to bother us at the bus stop, to call them, and they would take care of them. Luckily, we didn't have to do that. I used to love clearing the park. But I'm downright freaked out now. Thank you for reading. Funhouse. When I was a little girl, I loved to go to the local amusement park. I had turned 10 that winter, which meant that I was finally allowed to go on most rides and other things on my own. When the park opened during spring, my parents took me there and allowed me to go on more rides than usual, as a belated birthday present. Best day ever, right? Well, there were two fun houses. I went through the more kid-friendly one first, to steel myself for the bigger, more adventurous-looking one. I had a good time, so I entered the second one immediately afterwards. Unlike the first funhouse, this one had a bit more areas on the inside. I braved the first floor and waved at my parents on my way to the second floor. The second floor was a bit of a maze, which frightened me a little, but at least there were other people around. At one point, I bumped into someone. I say bumped because they actually groped my ass. But I thought it was an accident at first. At that age, I didn't really know much about molestation, let alone child molestation, other than this was a bad touch. And when it seemed like an accident, it didn't even register as such. Unfortunately, I lost track of the other people while exploring the area and ended up alone. Or so I thought. I was groped again. I turned around but didn't see anyone. Of course, with the maze structure, it was kind of easy to hide quickly. I briefly wondered if it was part of the attraction, some soft thing that shoots out to scare you, but there wasn't anything to indicate that, not to mention that it had been a rather distinct squeeze. Then, it happened a third time, and I started to freak out. Of course, I couldn't find the exit immediately, so until I did, that sicko groped me 2 or 3 more times. I didn't even bother turning around anymore. I just tried to get the fuck out. I don't know why I just didn't scream for help. I guess I wanted to pretend I was brave or something. When I reached the outside area again, nobody was following me. My parents were obviously very relieved when I showed up. Finally, later they told me that they had been close to entering the funhouse themselves because it had taken me so long. I didn't tell my parents about the groping because at the time, I just thought that someone had tried to scare me. The realization of what had actually happened a couple years later was rather chilling.